As a law clerk, I thought, man, once I graduate and I pass the bar, I'm going to be ready to go hit the ground running. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Once you step into the shoes of an attorney, it's a completely different game. You know, the puck stops with you, and that's a whole different weight on your shoulders to carry.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Highlights. I'm your host, Alejandro Uriarte, and so today we're going to be interviewing another attorney at the firm, this time from a little bit of a perspective of a younger attorney, someone that's obviously still getting his feet wet with a lot of things, but still has some great advice that he can offer us, so we want to learn a little bit about Giancarlo today. So Giancarlo, thank you for joining us. I wanted to kind of start off with just some stuff about your background, and that way you can share a little bit with our viewers. So what would you say made you become a lawyer in the first place?
So I think my interest in becoming a lawyer started off probably in my college years. I'd say sophomore year of college. I was working at a law firm at the time, startup law firm. But at the same time, I was studying accounting in undergrad. And at that time, I thought I kind of wanted to be a CPA. Once I graduated college, I decided, you know what, I don't think I want to be a CPA anymore. I want to stick with being a lawyer. I was just interested in helping people. It was a plaintiff's law firm. I liked the attorney I was working for under the time. They did a little bit of personal injury and foreclosure claims as well. And I've always was interested in helping people. So that's kind of the first instance I'd say that made me think about going to law school.
Okay, awesome. So, and I know there's probably like a big difference between knowing that you want to go to law school and then knowing that you want to be a lawyer and then knowing what kind of lawyer you want to be, at least right in your mind. I know I kind of went through that. Did you have any idea at the time yet what kind of law you wanted to practice in?
I say going into law school, I thought transactional was going to be my path because I had that accounting background from school and then also some litigation. I always thought it'd be some tax law or tax litigation kind of deal. After 1L, though, I realized I think I wanted to just do straight litigation, whether it be personal injury, business disputes, anything like that. And then that's why I decided to join the trial team. And I think that was the right decision. Now that I've been in practice for a year and a half, I feel like that was the right decision to make.
Nice, nice. I was always told when I was in law school, you know, I kind of had an idea of what I thought I wanted to do. And somebody told me what's going to determine your job is actually going to be the market, right? And it's going to determine where you're going to land because usually that first job or two, that's where you get your experience. And then you kind of like stuck in that. Did you face that at any point?
Right. So my 2L year, 3L year, around that time, what was hot in the market was property damage, property insurance claims. And that's kind of where I shifted gears towards. I had some mentors at the time that told me, you know, it's a great area to get your feet wet, get experience in litigation. You'll be taking depos, and there's a lot of claims out there to work. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up interning at a plaintiff's personal or property damage firm. And yeah, that's where I decided to start off my career. As we all know, the industry has shifted a little bit, but I think I definitely got that experience that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else, frankly.
Yes, yes, definitely. There's a lot going on in those kind of claims, right? So walk me a little bit through any fears that you may have had going into your first legal job. Was there anything that you were kind of scared about?
Yeah, I think as a law clerk, I thought, man, once I graduate and I pass the bar, I'm going to be ready to go hit the ground running. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Once you step into the shoes of an attorney, it's a completely different game. You know, the puck stops with you, and that's a whole different weight on your shoulders to carry. So I think at the beginning, I thought it would just be more, you know, drafting and every now and then a hearing or defending a depo. But quickly you start realizing it's a lot more than that. The responsibility falls on you. Clients rely on you to give them advice, and they rely on you to solve a big problem for them, whether it be a personal injury claim or a property damage claim. You know, someone that needs their house fixed or they're suffering from, you know, a serious injury. The stakes are a lot higher. So I think that's probably one thing I didn't realize as a law clerk, that the stakes are way higher once you're an attorney. And I think that's something, to embrace, not to be scared of. But it was definitely something to get used to as a young attorney just passing the bar.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure, right? It's like sink or swim on a lot of these in a lot of these law firms where, I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect between law school and actually your first legal job. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What you felt like maybe the differences were in that transition between law school to law work?
Right. Completely different. I don't think law school prepares you to be a lawyer, and so to speak. It teaches you how to think like a lawyer, but not a practice. The ins and out of litigation, there's so many different things that can happen. I think the best thing to prepare for to be an attorney in litigation, I think, would be to join trial team. But more importantly, I think probably one of the most effective classes I took was pre-trial practice because, as we all know, not every case goes to a trial. So pre-trial practice, learning motion practice, discovery rules, objections, responses, I think that was the most helpful. But I'm of the school of I think you got to do the actual work to learn it. It's different in theory than when everything is on the line and you got to do it for real in a case.
Yes, yes. And I could tell you that I saw kind of like a lot of things that shocked me, I guess, when I first started as a lawyer. What would you say is an example of maybe like one of the biggest shocks that came to you as soon as you started your legal career?
I think probably one of the biggest shocks or something that was maybe expected but not super expected was, attorneys from the other side seeing that you're a young buck that just passed the bar and they have experience. They might know things that you don't. And they'll try to scare you. They'll try to use their tactics to take a small settlement or something like that. But I think it's important to, one, trust your gut, review the file. If you have a good feeling in your gut that this is one to push, then to push, and to also rely on your team. I think that's very important too. Definitely not going to know anything. You're not going to know everything as a new attorney, but it's important to ask questions and not be afraid to, ask the person next door, a few doors down, for some help. So I think that's one advice also I'd give to a younger attorney coming up.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I think that there were moments too where it kind of hit me, right? That it's like, you're a lawyer now, you got to figure things out. Would you say there was any particular moment where like that kind of hit you that you're like, okay, this is real. Like I'm a lawyer now?
I'd say my first hearing in front of a judge where I thought I went in prepared. I prepared all night the day before the hearing, and I got in there, and the judge just wasn't siding with me. Asked me questions that I thought I'd prepared for, but he just pounded me on some questions, and although we won the motion, it felt like, wow, like you can prepare for as much as you can, but you never know what's going to be thrown at you. So it's very important, and I think that comes with experience too. Once you get your feet wet a little more, you start knowing how to answer certain things, whether it be a judge, a client, an opposing counsel. So I think those types of instances where you don't know what you don't know or what's coming are definitely a shock. But as with time, with anything, you start getting more comfortable where you're at.
Yeah, yeah. And I think obviously, like you said, preparation is a big key to it. So I was always told, like, know your file inside and out. So at least that way you could say that you prepared as much as possible. And then that way you can handle things that kind of get thrown off
Right.
and maybe that you didn't expect. But if you know your file, you're usually pretty good. What would you say was the most stressful part of your job as a lawyer?
I think managing expectations to a client or maybe giving bad news to a client that they might not want to hear. Personally, it does feel stressful because clients have been looking forward to, let's say, a recovery in their case for a long time. And unfortunately, there's facts that come out or things that occur in the case where you need to tell them, they need to make a certain decision. And they might not be happy with that decision, but it's definitely something that has to be done. I'm of the thought that immediately tell a client whenever something doesn't look good. But I think that's probably the most stressful part because, people have expectations and especially injured clients that are looking to be compensated for their injuries. I think that's the toughest part that I'd say would be the most stressful apart from, deadlines that we all have to deal with.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight on your shoulders. What would you say is something that people don't normally expect that a lawyer goes through? Because, there's obviously a lot of people think like, oh, this is what a lawyer does, right? Or, your parents may think, oh, this is what he does, right? But what is it actually like being a lawyer? What would you think is something that people wouldn't expect, something about being a lawyer that they don't understand or they don't know?
I think that it might look on the outside that it's very simple as just filing a lawsuit and trying to settle a case. I think there's a lot of things that happen in a case where being a lawyer, you need to think of every possible outcome that could occur and what to do if that happens, right? So I think it's a lot of scenarios, making up scenarios in your head of what could happen and what to do if those things happen. So definitely, I think the part about being a lawyer that people don't think about is that there's a lot of thinking and planning that goes into certain decisions in a case for a client.
Yeah, maybe the amount of time that you're putting into the file, right? Because they think, oh, well, drafting a complaint is just cut and paste, but they don't understand the amount of hours that it's taken reviewing every single part of that complaint that should be in there, which shouldn't be in there. It's a lot of pressure, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So in terms of, obviously, over the last couple of years, I'm sure you've learned a lot as well. What would you say is something that you've gotten a lot better at, like, let's say, within the last year or two?
I'd say taking depositions. At first, taking your first deposition, you like to read off a script, and I'm usually the type to know to like to know what I'm going to ask and how they're probably going to answer. But as I started taking my first few depositions, I realized it's better to just listen to the question or the answer to the question that's being asked, and then make your following question, based off of that answer. I think it's easy to get lost in a script sometimes, and it might feel comfortable to read off a script for a deposition. But I think once I got into the practice of really learning the file, the ins and outs of a file, and just asking questions and following up with questions that make sense based on the answer, that I would get more helpful information from the deposition instead of just reading down a laundry list of questions. I think hearings as well. At first, when you're an attorney coming out, you're nervous at a first hearing or two. Once you see how judges rule and what they're looking for, I think it helps prepare yourself better for hearings and what to expect, what questions they're going to ask and things like that.
Yeah, it's more like the more you do, then the better you get at it, right? The more comfortable you get with things, right?
Correct. So I think once you get your feet wet, it's like anything. It's like riding a bike. Once you do it a few times, you get comfortable with it, you get confident with it, and then it's second nature. You don't even think about, being nervous about getting on Zoom or being in front of a judge in person anymore. So
Yeah.
I'd say those two things.
And sometimes people got to do things that are uncomfortable in order to grow, right? It's like, oh, but I have a fear of this, or this makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, well, once you do it, the great part is that the growth that comes after that is incredible, right?
Correct. I think, the feelings of nervousness get outweighed by the feelings of confidence after you finish something like that. I think that feeling of like, wow, I can do this outweighs any type of fear that you might have. It might not feel comfortable leading up to what you got to do, but once you finish it, you'll notice that this is just something that you can do all the time.
Yeah. And obviously, we're all still learning, of course, as we go through this legal career, right? What would you say is a skill that you're still working on right now?
I think a skill that I'm still learning on right now would be, to not be afraid to ask questions. I'm usually the type that doesn't like to ask questions out of one, fear of showing that I don't know something, or two, being annoying. I think it's important, especially in a new practice, to be okay with asking questions. Obviously do your homework, do your research first. And if you can't find the answer, it's totally fine to ask someone next door for some help, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's the great part about collaboration, working in that type of environment or that culture where there are other attorneys, obviously, that are willing to help.
Right.
So now there's obviously a lot of pressure with handling somebody's case, like you've said. How do you typically deal with that pressure of handling that client's case? potentially knowing that you're responsible for the outcome. How do you deal with that?
I think it's important to remember to remain calm, although it's very important and there's serious consequences to the case that's in front of me. I think it's important to remain calm, have a steady head. It's very important as a lawyer to have a steady head because a client wants someone that is level-headed enough to carry their case forward. So I think that's something I've learned along the way. That although things might seem bigger than they are in the grand scheme of things, things get worked out eventually. So I think it's important to keep a level head and make sure that, the client feels comfortable that they're working with someone that's level headed to take on whatever comes their way.
Yeah, because there's still work to do even after someone potentially makes a mistake or whatnot. It's like, okay, well then what's next, right? What are the options now at this point instead of pointing the finger and just hiding your head in the sand, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, awesome. What would you say is the biggest lesson so far that you've kind of learned throughout your career?
I would say to document everything. That's probably one of the biggest things I've learned so far, and to be upfront with things as they come in. If there's some bad news we got to give to the client, it's better to give it now than later down the line. And yeah, make sure to document everything. Mistakes happen, like you said. Everyone's gonna make a mistake from every so often. There's gonna be a mistake, and I think it's important to own up to it. Like you said, not point fingers and get to solutions. I think that's the most important thing.
Yes. And obviously, as you're now progressing and growing in your career, wanted to kind of ask you a little bit of feedback as to why you joined our firm at Uriarte Law. Do you have anything in particular that steered you in that direction?
Well, I think the people. The people that I spoke to before I came in here really showed that they cared. They cared about the people they work with, the people that they want to work with, and their clients, most importantly. I think this place has good priorities. Everyone's always looking to help each other. And like I mentioned, I think everyone here is looking to make sure that the clients are helped out in the right way as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's something that we try to do intentionally since the beginning of the firm, making sure that it's a culture where everybody does know that not only are we here to help the clients, but also to help each other. When we have any issues or, obviously in our development, whether it's working on a case together or, yes, okay, a mistake was made or something happened, right? All right, how do we work together to fix the problem and to achieve the best result for the client, right? Was there anything in particular you'd say, like something specific that has stood out to you about the law firm?
I'd say the team mentality, kind of going back to your last question. It's all about the team, and I'm all about that because I come from a sports background. I played sports my entire life, been on teams, and I think that's very important to have in whatever type of team, a law firm, any other type of business. It's important to have a team that thinks about each other first and the common goal that we all have. So I think I was very impressed with how I'd say it's at the top of people's heads here, that it's about the team and that's first. Personal achievements come second. So I think that's what I was impressed with more than whatever individual accomplishments anyone had here.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Anything else that you would say, like maybe surprised you specifically from working at the firm, maybe like in a good way, anything that came as a surprise?
I think the connection between departments, I've been at places before where, the litigation team is a whole completely different, it's almost like a different company or office. And what I did notice here is that, the pre-lit team, the lit team, management, whatever team it is, they all kind of click together, and they'll go upstairs, we'll come downstairs for lunch. Everyone kind of mingles with each other, and I think that's something that impressed me as well. I think at a lot of other places, attorneys do their own thing. They don't really interact with the pre-lit team. I think that's important because, as a lawyer, the pre-lit team, you're working on the case that they're building up for you.
Yep.
So I think there has to be some type of, cohesion between those two. So yeah, that's something I was impressed with.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that, because that was very intentional as well, trying to create what we call the client journey and just making sure that as the client is taken care of from the moment that they come into the firm all the way into the end, we need to make sure that they go through that transition smoothly and not have issues with the handoff from one part of their case to the other, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, awesome. Now, talking about clients, I wanted to shift a little bit that way. What would you say is something that you wish every client really understood about their case?
I wish they just understood that it's a process and to trust the process.
Yeah.
It might sound cliche, but these things do take time. And I wish, I had the checkbook and I was writing them the check. But they need to understand that there's someone else on the other side that has a checkbook in their hand.
Yes.
And it takes time. It's not something that is one day to the next. And I think it's important to know that their case is different than anyone else's. Every case is unique. Just because a friend, a cousin, a brother, sister settled their case maybe quickly or settled it for more money, doesn't mean that they won't get the same, but doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same or in the same
Yeah.
time frame. So I think it's important to remember that, your case is unique, and that's a good thing, I think, to embrace that, and to just trust the process, trust the attorney that's working on your file, and that there's a method behind the madness. There's a reason why we do certain things, and that it's been proven that, over time, it will result in better results for the client.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now, what do you think is something that a client does sometimes that might actually hurt their case?
I think getting to, I think acting like it's okay to just do whatever they want. A lot of times clients have injuries that they're making claims for. They don't realize maybe posting on social media, taking trips, as much as we all want to do those things. When you have a case, it's important to not let the other side have easy evidence against them. So
Yeah.
I think that's something they do that they don't realize hurts their case. And kind of going back to the last question, I think being impatient can hurt their case as well. If we're taking depositions, we're defending depositions, we're building that case for you, and we're building the evidence to eventually put on at a trial. So I think, if you don't let those things naturally flow in a case, you could hurt, the ultimate value of the case.
Absolutely, yeah, and I guess that part of maybe not understanding how much it can hurt the case, right? It's all about perspective sometimes, and even though it may not be what it seems, a lot of times it can be misconstrued by the other side, where they can take some of that evidence and tell a jury that it's something else, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's this smoke and mirrors that the defense may use to
Right.
try to either trick the jury or get them to sway in a different direction, even if it's not 100% accurate, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah. All right. Now, what about something you think that clients could do that actually might help their case, right? Like maybe being patient, or what are some other examples?
I think being patient, like you mentioned, giving a call to your attorney every now and then. There's not going to be an update every week. I wish there was, but it doesn't work like that. And I would say to just lay low, so to speak. I think, if you stay calm during the process, show it that you're level-headed, and show that you'd be presentable to a jury, I think is very important. Attorneys are looking at that, and adjusters are looking at that as well at a mediation. That's the last chance they have to see who's going to be sitting in the witness box at a jury trial. So I think it's important to come off as presentable, and show that you're willing to push your case forward if need be. So I think that's very important, to show that you're taking this seriously, and if we have to go to a jury trial, we will do so.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize that the other side has all the time in the world, right? Particularly when you're dealing with an insurance company, they have no rush, right? They can hold out for as long as possible. But obviously, our clients may have situations in their life where their injuries are preventing them from doing the work they used to do, or just limiting their life in some other way, right? So yeah, the insurance can hold out forever.
Right.
And again, they don't get the full story, right? So they may look at something on social media and try to make it something else, but they don't go into your house at night and see that that night you had to take some Tylenol, that you couldn't sleep that night, or see that you're attempting
Right.
to maybe gain a normal life again, right? But then sometimes it doesn't work out very well the
Right.
next day, right?
Right,
So,
right. I think that kind of goes back to some of the prior questions. I'd say yes, document everything. Advice I'd give to a client: document everything at the time of the accident, but at the same time, do not document everything later on down the line. I think it's important to make sure you document your injuries and the accident, whatever property damage you have.
Yeah.
At the same time, don't be documenting trips. You shouldn't be going on any trips if you're injured, obviously. Don't document anything that could hurt your case eventually down the line.
Yeah, and again, it's not that you're trying to hide anything, but it's like there's no need to maybe give something to the other side that they may misinterpret, right? Or that they may be able to use to try to swing it another way in these scenarios. I always
Exactly.
just tell clients not to exaggerate, obviously, because it's one of those things that you're not saying that you can't ever do anything again for the rest of your life. Just, you want to be able to explain, well, okay, well, this now affected me in this way. Like my trips aren't the same anymore. Like I could still go on trips, right? But now I can't carry the big heavy luggage that I used to. Or now I need to get to the airport a little earlier so that I can have help with the bags and, or I don't walk as much on my vacations. I purposely choose vacations that are a little less walking, right? Just normal stuff,
Right.
that it may have affected you in some capacity,
Right.
but may have not incapacitated you completely from ever doing a certain activity, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right. Getting a little bit more to the personal side. So how would you say that you deal with stress outside of work? Because, a lot of lawyers are known for obviously having high stress, and that seems to affect a lot of lawyers in different ways, right? Are there things that you could share that you do to help out with that?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a hobby outside of work, whether it be gym, reading, taking a walk, whatever it is. For me, it's mostly gym. I like to hit the gym late at night once it's empty and everyone is out of the gym. I think working out helps me clear my mind, and it makes me feel good, and actually makes me feel better for the next day coming up. I like to play sports every now and then. I'll play pickup basketball with some friends, some pickleball, things like that kind of make your mind turn off for a bit. As lawyers, we're never fully off. Our minds are never fully off work, but I think it's important to have something that at least takes your mind off of work for a little bit during the day. And I think being active is probably the best thing out there. I don't think there's anything else that compares really. But other than that, on the weekends, I like to go out to restaurants, try different restaurants. That's kind of what I do to disconnect a little bit.
Awesome. And that's funny because, it's sometimes different mind shifts between generations. And it used to be that a lawyer was expected basically to have no free time, right? It was just like you're expected to be here from 8 in the morning all the way until like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and even on the weekends. So you wouldn't typically see a lot of work-life balance in the older generations. So do you feel like obviously that's changed a lot more for lawyers now in your generation and maybe even younger, how that'll continue changing?
Yeah, it's definitely changed from what I hear. Obviously, I wasn't a lawyer back then, but definitely changed. I do like that old school thought, though. I think it's important to work as hard as you can, but not overdo it as well, right? So the way I see it is try to maximize the 8, 9 hours that you're at the office. Go home, relax for a bit, and if you have to log back on the computer for a bit, even with the TV on in the background, whatever you got to do to get ahead, I'm no stranger to that. That's kind of how I rule. But yeah, I think this new generation is more of the type to, work from a certain time to a certain time, which is fine. But I think as a lawyer, especially in litigation, it's not as easy to just clock in and clock out. You're always connected somehow. And I think if you don't have enough to do, then that's a different question to ask. But yeah, I'd say this new generation is definitely more of the type to focus on themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's what we chose as lawyers. We chose to this profession and knowing what this profession was. So I don't think it'll change forever. Definitely maybe a little bit less than before, but it's always going to be something that it'll happen. On the weekends, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to work after hours.
Yeah. It's finding that balance, right? Where it's like work ethic obviously is very important, where, the big law firms still want the attorneys that are being able to put in the hours, right? And not just be doing the bare minimum, of course. But at the same time, you want to have an attorney that obviously is being, like, I guess with their personal life, being able to balance it.
Right.
Having that is going to give you a better mental clarity, and it's going to allow you, I think, a little bit more free time to just kind of disconnect, right?
Right.
Which in turn helps your work at the end of the day.
That is true. I agree. I think, that helps for sure. Definitely
Yeah.
some personal time, especially with family. I think that's another thing too that helps a lot.
So speaking of that, like a day, what would you say is a typical day, let's say a work day? What does it look like for you from like when you wake up to when you go to sleep?
I like to wake up, make myself a coffee, listen to the news, read the news a little bit, then head out to work. Usually, first thing I like to do is read emails, knock out emails from either the afternoon from the day before or whatever's pending. And then I like to jump into the most important things. I like to prioritize my day. What's been something on my schedule that's kind of been in the back of my head that's bothering me. I like to knock that out if I can. Then the next most important thing, kind of go down to everything's important, but to the least important thing. And then, there's different things throughout the day. If it's a deposition, then obviously that schedule changes. Like today, I had a deposition in the morning. So in the morning, I was prepping, reviewing the file to prepare the client for his deposition, then defended the deposition. So in the afternoon, then I'll start focusing on emails and catching back up. So it all depends. Every day is kind of different. But I like to knock out important things first in the morning when energy is high. Then in the afternoon, start working on other things.
And then, like you said, maybe at home, then check, go to the gym, let's say disconnect a little bit, right? And then maybe watch some TV, answer some more emails.
Exactly. Shoot some more emails and try to get ahead. The
Yeah,
inbox never goes down. It only goes up.
Yeah, it's like if you have a hearing the next day, you might want to kind of refresh a little bit and, get your mind reset, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So would you say that being a lawyer has actually changed the way that you look at people or situations? And if so, how?
A lot of people say that once you become a lawyer, you look at things differently. I don't know if I've always thought a certain way, but I don't think it's been much. But obviously law school teaches you how to think a certain way. And being a lawyer also makes you think a certain way as well. I think maybe it's made me be more careful about certain things. Maybe it's the way I drive. It's definitely made me think more about documenting certain things when they happen, make sure everything's written. When I help out family members with certain things, it's always like, make sure you have it in writing. Just because they told you something doesn't mean it's true. So I think maybe that way. But definitely changes your thinking a little bit. I don't think it's changed towards a more pessimist side. I think a more optimistic side, I'd say. I think the work that, at least on our side that we do is optimistic. You're helping people and it makes you feel good for sure.
Yeah, definitely. The only bad part is I feel like I look at everything as a potential lawsuit, right? I'm like, oh, that's terrible. Oh, look at that negligence over there, right?
Right.
So.
Definitely driving down the Palmetto, I'm like, any moment I can see how this ends up being a lawsuit.
Yeah, it's terrible, but somebody's got to do it, right? So going now into maybe people that want to go to law school, a little bit of reflection and advice. What would you say to somebody that may be thinking about going to law school right now?
I tell them, turn off the outside noise. You're going to hear a lot of lawyers tell you like, oh, don't do it. It's not what you think it is. And I think it's important to not let that advice steer you away from wanting to go to law school. If you've made the decision and you've done your research and you want to go to law school, you should go. I think it's the degree with the most opportunities out there. It's a tool. And whether you choose it to do litigation, transactional, there's so many different areas of law. I think it's a great tool. I wouldn't listen to, things that are coming out now. I think recently that law school applications are up the highest of all time. I think highest since COVID. I wouldn't listen to that noise because all you're going to do is you're just going to wait. You're going to say, hey, actually, you know what? People are saying I shouldn't do it. Then you look back 4 or 5 years from now and you look back like, wow, those 3, 4 years, I would have been a lawyer already. I would have been practicing already. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to block out the outside noise. Be confident. If you decided to do it, there was a reason why you decided to do it. And be confident. and go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of 3 years, I was kind of thinking about that. Like, what would you tell yourself on day one of being a lawyer if you could go back to that time?
If I could go back, that it's all going to work out. I think 1L year, your first year of law school, I think you can compare it to maybe your first few months of being an actual attorney, where everything is on fire. When you're a 1L, you have a ton of cases to read, and you got to brief cases, and you got to be ready for that teacher that might call on you. And so you're freaking out, and you're making notes, and you're worried about a teacher calling you, and you're not knowing the answer. And then the same thing when you first become an attorney. You basically know nothing. So I would tell 1L me that it'll all work out. Just trust the process. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's something that every attorney had to go through. And if they could do it, then I could do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting that confidence, right? Even though that's part of it, right? Is getting through that fear. But yeah, just being able to see that future self and be like, wow, I did all that. Right. That confidence is incredible. What would you say that you're focused on improving right now as a lawyer?
I would say litigation skills. I think that's, just knowing what's going on is not enough. I think it's now how to be effective with knowing what's going on. Whether it be, I'd say, objections and depositions, filing certain motions, being more strategic, and pushing cases to a more favorable outcome for the client. And to do that is by being more strategic with cases. I think that's what I'm learning how to do now, how to value cases as well. I think that's probably the most important thing that I think comes with, pattern recognition, seeing cases that come across your desk. And I think that's probably the most important thing I'm working on is valuing cases. And when to push and when not to push on certain cases.
Yes, definitely. What would you say excites you the most about the future of the profession? I know a lot of people say AI and, there's all these crazy new things coming. And then some people are kind of scared about it, right? And they're saying, oh, AI is coming for our jobs, right? But what would you say, like, when you're thinking about the future, what excites you the most about that?
I'd say kind of like how you mentioned AI. I'm of the thought that I don't think we should be scared about it, especially litigators. I don't see how AI would take over for a litigation position. It might help, definitely drafting, doing research. I think it's great for that. Now, putting AI on the spot, if a judge asks an AI a question, it might work, but it's just not the same way. I think there's a personal level to the legal field that just can't be broken. That barrier can't be broken with technology, I think. But I think I'm excited for, the profession. I think there's a lot of new blood. There's a lot of younger attorneys that are embracing new technologies, new schools of thought. As this older generation kind of weeds out, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us younger lawyers to step in and fill those shoes that they've left behind. So that's what I'm excited about, really.
Awesome. And where do you see yourself, let's say, in 5 years?
In 5 years, hopefully at that point, taking cases to trial, being comfortable with, being okay with a low ball offer and saying, you know what, we can take this to a trial if we need to. So I think that's kind of where I see myself in 5 years, trying cases. Hopefully, I know it's very hard to do, but would love to. One of my goals is to be board certified.
Yes.
So I think at that point, hopefully be close to that level. I know 5 years is pretty fast, but I think that's where I see myself.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for all your advice. Obviously, we'll want to gauge different generations and, some advice that you may have may resonate more with a younger person. We interviewed also another generation earlier that my dad has been an attorney, obviously, for 40 years, has different advice, right? So I think it's always amazing to see different perspectives.
Right.
All right, so that'll wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for listening into the podcast. Beyond the highlights, of course, feel free to like and subscribe.